categorized, but more than 40% of our children will have an experience of trauma before the age of 18. And children of divorced parents are 3 times more likely to develop psychological problems compared to children of parents with healthy marriages. And yet, even as we breathe right now, there's a divorce happening somewhere. Every second, there is a divorce. Every second, a family is broken. A child is deprived of a normal life every second. I was born in 1989 in eastern Bhutan, in a remote village called Wuling under Orongyo in Samluchongpa district. My house was situated in the middle of a forest, far from the main village, separated by 2 rivers. Often we would be cut off from the main village during the summer because the 2 rivers between my house and village would become very big and we would not be able to cross it. So we would run out of supplies like salt and oil. My uncles who were living in the main village would come to the other side of the river with plastic bottles filled with salt and oil. They would tie it to a rope and throw it from the other side, and this side of the river would be us trying to catch it. So that was the fun part. But because of the weather, my sister was losing a lot. She was missing school and she was failing. She had failed so much that later on, whenever we had our sibling rivalry situations, I would tease her by calling her Tirki Tirel. That's, how we were taught to say a train of 3 in our language. So she studied in the 3rd grade for 3 years. By the time I was of age to be admitted to school, my mother took a very bold decision that changed our lives forever. She decided to move to Dewathang. Dewathang was a wonderland for me. It was a wonderland for a jungle boy like me, who had never been out of the village before. Small things like, electric bulb, mesmerized me a lot, but Dewathang had so much to show. I used to spend hours just watching the vehicles on the road. I used to wonder if they were animals or something else. Nothing shocked me more than the television. I wondered where on earth did those tiny people in the boxes live. But Dewathang had a lot more to show, and I had a lot more to learn. And the reason why my mother had moved to Dewathang was to live with her husband. But by the time I knew that I had a father, my parents already divorced. Sad. But what's interesting is that at that time, my father had 3 wives. There's more. And he had 13 children, including a son from a 4th wife, who also happened to be my mother's sister. After knowing this about myself, my life took a very different turn. I started looking at life from a very different angle, and I found myself in a very difficult situation, because not only did my parents get separated, I was left with a very poor mother who was struggling to raise her children. So we were very poor, and there were so many times I didn't want to exist. I still remember when I went to school, And my teacher would ask me, why did you not pay your school fees? That was a really hard moment for me because my mom could not afford the school fees. But that was not all. At home, we rarely celebrated Bhutanese occasions like Bhutanese New Year, like Losar, because my mother couldn't afford to buy things that are needed for celebrating Losar. Nothing was harder than the beginning of the year, because that would be the time when me and my sister would be wondering about, how will we get our school uniform and the stationeries that we will need to go to school. Often, my mother would come up with interesting ideas. Uniforms get worn out in a year, right? The black pattern would become white, and even the red would have become white. So what my mother would do is, she would make it into a new one, stitch my go into a new go by turning the go inside out. So that's something interesting that she did. So my mother was having a really tough time raising us and also providing for our education. And I couldn't bear it. So once I told her that I'll not go to school, I'll work and I'll help her. But she told me to just continue studying. She'll do whatever she can to manage to meet the expenses that would be required for my schooling and my education. My mother strongly believed in education because she used to tell us stories of when she was a little kid about how government officials would come to the villages to take young boys and girls to enroll in school. And at that time, parents would hide their children and sometimes would even bribe government officials with butter and cheese to not take their kids. So children whose parents could afford the bribe remained as farmers in the villages, but parents who could not afford to bribe the officials had to send their children to schools. And actually, those children who went to school were the ones who later on became successful civil servants and lived comfortable lives. So I continued to go to school, but the weather still continued to be my enemy, especially summer. That's because most of the time in my schooling, I did not have an umbrella. So every time it rained, I would get wet, and at times I would get too wet that I would hesitate to go to school. So in summers, I missed a lot of classes. And not just that, I used to collect empty papers from old books and stitch them into new ones. And I don't know if any one of you has done it, but at that time, especially someone from a family like me would cut worn out soles of bata slippers into small pieces and use it as erasers. And my walking style would change according to the condition of my shoes. It would be normal if my shoes were okay, but after a while the shoes would start opening its eyes, and by the time the shoe had opened its mouth, I would be dragging my feet. I thought I did not deserve to suffer that way. I thought life was not fair. I was sad, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was violent, and I always used to ask myself, why? Why me? But when I was with my friends, I would forget about my situation. But my friends who were my partners in crime, we would often bunk classes and do a lot of naughty things, and we were not afraid of getting caught, getting slapped, or getting whipped. It meant nothing to us, especially me. It happened a lot to me, including getting rubbed with nether plants between your thighs. So I was a violent guy. But friends can change your lives forever sometimes. And that happened with me when I was in my 10th grade. I met a new friend. He was a very spiritual person. He made me realize that my future is completely under my control. So I also became a spiritual person and I started praying. And at the same time, one interesting thing that happened to me was that one day I was at my friend's place and I came across a music video of Eminem being played on TV. It was like love at the first sight. I instantly liked it. Like I had never seen anything like that before. You know, Eminem, at that time of course I didn't know it was Eminem. The guy in the music video was singing so fast like a monk, chanting scriptures, ta-ta-ta, 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 ta-ta-ta. And the beat of the sound was hitting my heart directly, and the entire music made me feel like current was flowing through my body like zung, 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 zung. So I asked my friend like, what's that, man? And he told me that it's a rap song. Then I asked more about it because I was really interested in it. So I didn't have a TV at home, but I had a cassette player. So I managed to get an album of Eminem and I started listening to it. Now, I'm talking about 2005 or 6. At that time, most of the people would listen to Bollywood songs or some would listen to Bhutanese songs. But people who listened to English songs were considered cool back then. So what I would do is, my house was situated by the roadside, so every time I saw people walking on the road, I would increase the volume of the music so that they would know that I'm listening to an English song, so that they would think that, you know, I'm a cool guy as well. But the turning point came when later on I came across a story of Eminem written on a newspaper. I found that Eminem also came from a disadvantaged family. He was poor and his parents were also separated. His story felt like mine, so I could relate to his story. So he inspired me to work hard in life. So when I was done with my 10th grade, two things had happened in my life. Number one, I became spiritual after meeting a good friend. And number two, I was inspired to work hard after knowing about Eminem. I never gave up on my studies. I was still poor, but I worked to earn my money. I worked by the roadside. I've taken jobs which required me to sleep in forest and also by the riverside. I did not let my condition be an excuse for failure. I made my condition my strength. And today I have graduated from a college and I also have a job. My mother doesn't have to weave anymore and she doesn't have to worry about paying her rent. The same jungle boy who was surprised by a TV has now appeared on international TV channels like CNN and BBC. The boy who walked barefoot in the jungle has flown to foreign countries to share his stories. The boy who slept in the forest and on sand on the riverbank without blankets has slept and experienced what is it like to sleep in 5-star hotels. None of this would have been possible without my mother. Imagine if my mother did not decide to move to Devatham. Imagine if my mother agreed with me to drop school. I would not be here, and all this has been possible because of my mother. Stories can touch lives. I was changed in a way because of knowing Eminem's story. So I have been going around sharing my stories with the hope that it will touch someone's heart, someone's life, as Eminem's story touched me. In 2019, I took an extraordinary leave from office. People asked me if I was going to Australia. Some asked me if I was going to start a business. I told them I'm going to travel to all the 20 districts of the country and share my stories, share my experience with youths in schools and colleges. Then they asked me, are you going to make any money by doing it? I told them, no, I'll be spending my savings instead. And after doing 25 shows in 35 days, not only did I spend my savings, but I also finished the savings of my wife. But even if a single person has benefited from my story, from my show, I would be satisfied. People ask me, how are you able to do these kind of things? I tell them it comes from experience and it comes from what I've seen. And there's one question that I ask myself. This question is what gives me the strength to never give up. This question is what gives me the courage to do the right thing, even if it means not being liked by some people. And it goes something like this. There is no doubt that you are fortunate to be born in Bhutan. But is Bhutan fortunate to have you as its citizen?